You look like a poor trash worker. My sister Savannah didn't whisper it. She announced it to the entire table. My father, Gregory, didn't defend me. He just chuckled into his wineglass. My sister's fiancé, Tyler, smirked like I was nothing but cheap entertainment. They sat there mocking my life and my dignity, completely unaware that they were sitting in a restaurant I built from the ground up. Then, a stranger at the next table stood up, looked the floor manager in the eye, and asked the one question that froze the room. Excuse me, why is the owner of this building letting these people disrespect her? Before I tell you what my sister did when she realized whose chair she was sitting in, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. 3 days before the wine hit my shoes, I was standing in my kitchen, staring at a text message that felt less like an invitation and more like a summons. It was from my mother, Patricia. Savannah's engagement dinner. 7 p.m. The Foundry. Don't embarrass us. No hello. No asking if I was free. Just a demand to show up and play the part of the invisible sister. I am Brionna. And I am 30 years old. But to them, I am still just the disappointment who disappeared 10 years ago to play with garbage. They had no idea that garbage was actually acquiring distressed industrial real estate. They definitely had no idea that the Foundry, the most exclusive, impossible-to-book restaurant in Chicago's Fulton Market, was the first building I ever bought. I arrived 30 minutes early. I didn't enter through the owner's private entrance. I walked right through the front doors, wearing a nondescript black blazer and holding a digital tablet. I positioned myself right next to the host stand. I needed them to see me exactly how they expected to see me, serving them. When the heavy steel doors opened, Savannah walked in like she was royalty inspecting a peasant village. She was draped in white silk, clinging to her fiancé, Tyler, who looked like he had spent more time on his hair than his career. My parents, Gregory and Patricia, trailed behind them, looking around with that specific mix of awe and judgment they reserved for places they knew were expensive. I stepped forward. "Welcome to the Foundry," I said, keeping my voice flat and professional. Savannah stopped. Her eyes raked over my outfit, and a smirk curled the corner of her lip. "Oh, look," she said to Tyler. "She finally got a job. Hostess. Well, at least you're out of the house." I didn't flinch. I just held up the tablet. "High security protocol tonight," I said. "VIP guests only. The management requires a liability and privacy waiver signed before entry. No exceptions." Savannah rolled her eyes. "Seriously? Do you know who we are?" "Policy is policy," I said. "Sign. Or wait outside." She snatched the stylus from my hand. "Fine. Whatever. Just get us our table." She scribbled her signature without reading a single word of the text on the screen. She was too busy looking at her reflection in the glass door. Tyler signed next, making a joke about paparazzi. Then my father, Gregory, grabbed the tablet. He didn't even look at the screen. He was too busy trying to spot celebrities in the dining room. My mother signed last, looking at me with pure disdain. "Try not to drop anything tonight, Brionna," she whispered. I took the tablet back and watched the progress bar hit 100%. Upload complete. A cold satisfaction settled in my chest. They thought they had just signed a standard non-disclosure agreement. They hadn't. They were so arrogant, so sure that I was beneath them, that they didn't realize they had just executed a confession of judgment. It was a lethal legal instrument used in high-risk commercial lending. By signing, they had just voluntarily agreed that if they defaulted on a bill over $50,000, I had the immediate right to seize their listed personal assets to cover the debt. No court dates, no defense attorney, no trial. "Right this way," I said, gesturing toward the main dining room. I led them to the chef's table, the most prominent seat in the house, directly under the 4,000-pixel security cameras. I wasn't serving them dinner. I was serving them a lesson they would never recover from. "I want the 1982 Petrus," Savannah said. She didn't open the wine list. She didn't ask for a recommendation. She just named the most expensive bottle in the cellar, a $15,000 vintage that serious collectors waited years to taste. She wasn't ordering it because she appreciated the notes of dark cherry and truffle. She was ordering it because she wanted to watch me pour a year's worth of rent into her glass like a servant. "Excellent choice," I said, my face a mask of neutral service. I signaled the sommelier to bring the bottle. I wanted them to have it. I wanted the bill to be astronomical. Tyler leaned back in his chair, looking around the industrial chic dining room with a sneer. "So, Brionna," he said, loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear. "Still scraping by? I heard you were living out of your car for a while." I paused while opening the bottle. "I have an apartment, Tyler." Savannah laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. "Don't be mean, babe. She's recovering, you know, from the lifestyle." She made air quotes. It was her favorite lie. For years, she had told people I was a drug addict to explain why I vanished from their social circle. It covered up the truth that they had discarded me and made her look like the long-suffering saint of a sister. My mother, Patricia, sighed, adjusting her pearls. We're just glad she has a job. Even if it is menial. Honest work is better than where she was headed. My father nodded solemnly, accepting the lie he knew was false. They were rewriting my history in real time, erasing my achievements to keep their narrative intact. I poured the wine. The dark red liquid swirled in the crystal glasses. I moved to Savannah's right side. As I tilted the bottle, her hand shot out. It wasn't a tremble. It wasn't an accident. It was a calculated, sharp shove against my wrist. The glass tipped. The $15,000 wine cascaded off the table and drenched my shoes. The sound of crystal shattering on the concrete floor silenced the entire VIP section. Savannah didn't gasp. She didn't apologize. She looked down at my ruined shoes, then up at my face, and snapped her fingers. Oops, she said, her voice dripping with mock innocence. Clean it up. That's what you're good for, right? Being underneath us. The room waited for my reaction. I slowly lowered myself to one knee with a cloth napkin. As I wiped the crimson stain from the floor, I looked up at her from my kneeling position. She was beaming. She looked fed, and in that moment of absolute humiliation, I had a flash of clarity that turned my anger into something colder. This wasn't just bullying. This was the pathology of the golden child. Savannah was hollow. She had never built anything, never earned anything, never sacrificed for anything. Deep down, in the places she couldn't hide from herself, she knew she was a fraud. She knew I had something she didn't grit. To feel superior, she didn't just need to succeed. She needed to see me destroyed. Her cruelty wasn't a display of power. It was a desperate, pathetic mechanism she used to inflate her own fragile ego. She was drinking my humiliation like it was the wine she just wasted because without it, she would starve. I finished wiping the floor. The last thread of familial loyalty I had been holding on to didn't just break. It incinerated. I wasn't looking at my sister anymore. I was looking at a parasite. I stood up, holding the soiled napkin. My expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. I'll take care of that, I said softly. I wasn't talking about the wine. I stood up slowly, letting the dirty napkin fall onto the table right next to Savannah's plate. She recoiled like it was toxic waste. What are you doing? She snapped. Go get a mop. I ignored her. I reached into the pocket of my blazer and pulled out a small, sleek radio. I pressed the transmit button and spoke one word, my voice calm and absolute. Red. The effect was instantaneous. The soft jazz music cut out, plunging the room into silence. The warm ambient lighting dimmed until only the harsh surgical spotlights above the chef's table remained illuminated. A heavy, mechanical thud echoed through the space as the steel security shutters over the main entrance locked into place. The staff, who had been bustling around moments ago, stopped moving. They turned to face our table, their expressions neutral, disciplined, and waiting. What is this? Tyler asked, looking around nervously. Is the power out? I stepped back from the table, shedding the submissive posture I had worn for the last hour. I didn't look like a hostess anymore. I looked like the person who signed the checks. No power outage, I said, my voice projecting clearly in the silent room. Just a lockdown. Standard procedure when a guest destroys property and attempts to leave without paying. Savannah laughed, but it was a thin, nervous sound. Destroys property? It's just wine, Brionna. Don't be dramatic. I'll tip you extra. I walked over to the wall where a large projection screen was mounted. I tapped my tablet. The screen flared to life, displaying an itemized bill in high definition. The numbers were large, stark, and undeniable. You just spilled a $15,000 bottle of vintage Petrus, I said, pointing to the first item. On a pair of custom Italian leather shoes worth $800. I pointed to the second item, inside a commercial property valued at $15 million. The final number appeared at the bottom of the screen, glowing red. Total due, $58,000. And guess what? I turned back to face them, letting the silence stretch until it was suffocating. I own all three. My father, Gregory, choked on his water. My mother, Patricia, went pale. Savannah just stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. What? She whispered. Would you own this place? I bought this building 10 years ago, I said, when it was a rotting warehouse that Dad's company dumped for scrap. I gutted it. I rebuilt it. I turned it into the most profitable square footage in this district. You're not eating at a restaurant I work at. You're eating in my house. Tyler looked from the bill to me, his eyes widening as he did the math. Wait, he said. $58,000? For dinner? For dinner. For the wine your fiancé just wasted. And for the cleaning fee, I said coldly. Payment is due immediately. Cards, cash, or wire transfer. I don't care how you do it. But no one leaves until that balance is zero. Savannah stood up, her face flushing with rage. You can't do this. You lured us here. This is entrapment. I invited you to dinner, I corrected. You chose to order the most expensive wine on the menu without checking the price. You chose to destroy property. Now you get to choose how you pay for it. I crossed my arms. So, who's picking up the check? The successful business owner? The wealthy fiancé? Or the golden child? I don't have $58,000, Savannah stammered. Her voice was small, stripped of all its usual arrogance. She looked at Tyler, desperate for him to step in, to be the hero. But Tyler was looking at the bill on the screen, then at the industrial chic surroundings, and finally at me. I could see the gears turning in his head. He wasn't looking at a waitress anymore. He was looking at a multimillionaire. And then he looked back at Savannah, a woman who had lied about everything, including her own sister's life. He took a step away from her. You told me your parents were paying for everything, he said. You told me Brionna was a junkie. She is, Savannah shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at me. This is all a lie. She probably hacked the system. Mom, Dad, tell him. Gregory and Patricia stood there, paralyzed. They knew the truth. They knew I had bought this building. They knew I had built this business. But admitting it meant admitting they had bet on the wrong horse for 30 years. It meant admitting their golden child was a fraud. So they stayed silent. Fine, I said, reaching for my radio. If you can't pay, I'm calling the police. Theft of services is a felony at this amount. I turned my back to them, ready to make the call. I thought it was over. I thought logic and shame would finally force them to retreat. I was wrong. I had underestimated the sheer, rabid desperation of a narcissist cornered. A metallic clatter made me turn back around. Savannah had grabbed a serrated steak knife from the table. No, she screamed, her eyes wide and wild. You don't get to win. You don't get to ruin my life. Before anyone could move, before I could even process what was happening, she didn't lunge at me. She slashed the blade across her own forearm. Blood welled up instantly, dark and shocking against her white silk dress. She dropped the knife and let out a blood-curdling scream. She stabbed me. Help. My sister is crazy. She stabbed me. I stood frozen, my hand still on my radio. It was insane. It was grotesque. But what happened next was the true horror. My mother, Patricia, didn't hesitate. Not for a second. She didn't look at the knife on the floor. She didn't look at the distance between us. She pointed a trembling finger at me and screamed, I saw it. She attacked Savannah. Call 911. My daughter is trying to kill her sister. Time seemed to stop. In that chaotic moment, amidst the screaming and the blood, a strange calm washed over me. It was the feeling of a heavy weight finally snapping off my ankle. For years, I had worn an invisible chain, the survivor's chain. It's the lie that keeps abused children loyal to their abusers. It's the hope that if you just work hard enough, if you just endure enough, if you just prove your worth, they will finally love you. I had built an empire trying to prove I was worthy of their love. The moment I saw my mother lie without flinching, I understood. They didn't despise me for failing, they feared me for seeing who they really were. Savannah was their idol, and I was the proof she wasn't perfect. They would rather watch me jailed than admit the truth. Savannah demanded Tyler back her lie, but I stayed silent. Let them perform. The red alert triggered my security team, and officers swarmed the room. Savannah pointed at me, screaming for my arrest until I gestured at the ceiling camera. One tap, and the projector replayed the moment Savannah took the knife and cut her own arm. The room froze. The officer's voice turned cold as he cuffed her for filing a false report and attempted assault. My father tried to storm out, thinking he could outrun the bill. I stopped him. The document he'd signed wasn't an NDA, it was a confession of judgment, pledging his own house as collateral. When their tab hit $58,000 and they tried to flee, the lien filed automatically. The brownstone belonged to me. They hadn't lost their home because I stole it. They lost it because arrogance kept them from reading the fine print. Savannah was hauled out screaming. Tyler removed his ring and walked away without a word. My parents stood stunned as everything they owned evaporated in front of them. I told them to leave. The foundry was mine. The cameras didn't lie. And their power was gone. When the night was finally empty, I sat at the head of the table, poured the wine they brought to humiliate me, and claimed the space they thought I didn't deserve. I didn't need their approval or their inheritance. I had my freedom and my own table.